Today we're going to learn about a war that broke out between Native Americans and English colonists in the New England area in 1675. New England is in the top right corner of this map. That consists of present-day Maine, New Hampshire, Vermont, Massachusetts, Connecticut, and Rhode Island. During this time in 1600s, it was occupied by several Native American tribes. Those tribes consisted of the Mohican, the Nipmuc, the Niantic, the Pequot, the Massachusetts, the Wampanoag, and the Narragansett. Today, we're going to talk about the Wampanoag especially. So all these tribes, they made up the Algonquin Native Americans. The Wampanoag tribes particularly was a society that was built around family relations. Both men and women could serve as their leader. The leader was called the sachem. In an early 17th century, they lived in present-day Rhode Island and southeastern Massachusetts. So, as these two maps show, kind of in this general area. Wampanoags came into contact with the European merchants at this time in the early 17th century, when Jamestown colonists first arrived. So there are some ramifications between these two different cultures clashing together. And when the English settlers arrived in New England, that meant that when they first arrived, that the Wampanoag taught the Pilgrims how to fish and grow crops. Specifically, we're talking about the Puritans here. However, there were epidemics from disease brought by Europeans. The Europeans took land, we call those land seizures by those settlers, and fighting against the colonists caused the deaths of many Native Americans in New England. Between 1600 and 1675, the region's Native American population decreased from 140,000 Native Americans to 10,000. Think about that. That is 130,000 Native Americans that passed away, if not more. During the same time period, however, the English population grew to 50,000 people. So by 1675, there were 50,000 English in the New England area. After a war between English colonists and the Pequot, which we've looked at some primary sources about, in 1636 and 1637, New England was pretty much free of any major armed conflict for about 40 years. In 1645, the New England Puritans launched a campaign to convert the Native Americans to Christianity. About 2,000 Native Americans lived in what we call praying towns, where missionaries pressured them to give up their cultures as Native Americans and become Christians like themselves, like the Puritans. So the leader of the Wampanoag tribe in 1675 was Sachem Matacomet. The English called him King Philip. Sachem the Pokanoket tribe of the Wampanoag Nation. In 1675, he forged a military alliance with about 2/3 of the region's Native Americans. So where is this headed? Well, in June 1675, Matacomet, aka King Philip, led an attack on an English settlement in Swansea, Massachusetts. Over the next year, Native Americans attacked more than half of the New England towns and destroyed 12 out of the 90, killing 5% of New England's colonists. Native American casualties in New England, however, were a lot higher. Perhaps 40% were killed by colonists or forced to flee as a result of colonial attacks. The English called this conflict King Philip's War. In August of 1676, colonial forces killed Matacomet. Then they mutilated his body and publicly displayed it. Shortly after, Native American defenses collapsed. Consequences for all of this were that the colonists sold many surviving Native American men into slavery in the West Indies and enslaved many women and children in New England. Colonists sent a smaller number of Native Americans back to those praying towns, which I previously mentioned. So that wraps up for this video. When we come back and look at this, we're going to be answering what caused this war. What are we talking about? We're going to look at documents to analyze what caused King Philip's War. See you tomorrow.